a beloved mother of 4 and high school teacher.
All of her students loved her, every single one of them.
Was a very special person. I always wanted to be more like her.
Is found murdered, her body dumped miles from home.
As I got closer, you could see the outline of the body. I've seen quite a few homicides, and this one was very brutal. It felt very personal.
Investigators try to piece together a mysterious crime.
Law enforcement believed there was a violent struggle within the bedroom.
He said that he did not hear this vicious attack that was taking place within feet of where he was sleeping.
How could you not hear what was going on?
Until the case takes a jaw-dropping turn.
He was crying. He was emotional and said that he had a gun to his head.
And leads to a killer no one suspected.
I can't even fathom what goes through someone's mind when they do something like this.
It was disturbing, very disturbing.
Olney, Texas, a tiny rural town with a proud history in aviation.
Olney, Texas was the home of Air Tractor, crop dusting aircraft. They built them there.
It's a very small town, very close-knit. Pretty much everybody knows everyone.
It's an open-door community. Doors are unlocked. People are very welcoming.
On a warm summer morning in 2019, a terrible discovery shakes residents to their core.
The Young County Sheriff's Office received a call of a missing person, and the Olney Police Department was dispatched to the call.
Just before 10 a.m., officers arrived to find homeowner Peter Allen and his 2 children, Kiara and Darian. Peter tells police he's worried something terrible has happened to his wife, 49-year-old high school teacher Manu Allen.
Peter told me that his wife was missing and that he had found a large amount of blood in their bedroom. And Peter told me that his wife's vehicle was gone.
Investigators head to the bedroom and are shocked at what they find.
As I got to the hallway, we started seeing signs of blood on the walls, most notably what looked like a handprint. And as we started going into the bedroom, we noticed there was a large pool of blood at the end of the bed and the knife on the floor. One of the things that we also noted in the bedroom is that there were no sheets on the bed, which seemed odd. There was blood splattered across the furniture, the mattress, the closet doors. And as we proceeded into the garage, you could clearly see drag marks. As we were in the kitchen, we did see what appeared to be a footprint. A picture started to develop that something very bad had happened.
As forensics begin processing the scene, police notify the DA's office.
My assistant district attorney, Philip Gregory, and I went out to the crime scene.
The carpets were pretty much soaked in blood. There was a lot of cast-off blood on the walls and on the doors, and it was a horrific scene to see. With that amount of blood, we were concerned that you're probably dealing with somebody who is deceased if they had not already made it to a hospital.
With no sign of the missing woman, investigators asked the family for more information about Manu Allen.
My mom was from a little village in southern Germany. She had 8 siblings. In the middle of my mom's college career, she came over to America to learn the language better. And my dad had seen her walk by, and my dad was like, "Ooh, who's that?" And while she was in America that summer, they spent like every day together.
Manu married U.S. Army veteran Peter Allen in 1996, and soon after, the couple moved to Crowell, Texas.
I came to know Peter and Manu when I was appointed police chief in Crowell, Texas, and Peter and I became good friends, and there was never no doubt that Peter and Manu loved each other very much.
Manu and Peter eventually settled in the small town of Olney with their 4 children.
My mom was a very supportive woman, but she was always pushing us to do our best.
Manu was one of the most respected teachers at Olney High School, teaching English and German.
All of her students loved her, every single one of them. And my mom, she'd always be one to joke with the kids. Even my friends, she would help them if they needed help with their homework after school.
Now, the loving wife and mother has gone missing. Police asked Peter Allen the last time he saw Manu.
The night before, he and his wife sat down on the couch, watched TV, and then he went to sleep on the couch and she retired to the bedroom to go to sleep.
Peter claims that no one noticed any sign of trouble until the morning.
So according to Mr. Allen, his daughter, Kiara, had woke up. I believe that she needed to get some laundry done. When the laundry room is through the parents' room, she noticed that there was some blood in the hallway area, and concerned about her mother, she went and woke up Mr. Allen on the couch. At that point, according to Mr. Allen went with her to investigate. He said that when he saw the knife, he drew the conclusion that she may have just been injured and cut. But clearly seeing the scene, a cut would not have produced the amount of blood, and it was very apparent that somebody was either severely injured or deceased.
Peter tells officers that he and Kiara went to the local hospital to look for Manu.
It did seem that it was out of place, the way that Peter went to the hospital first before calling law enforcement. There seemed to be a lack of emotion. He was very calm. So I pulled Officer Clark aside and I advised him, I said, we need to be very careful how we talk and handle Mr. Allen because he's potentially involved.
Law enforcement believed there was a violent struggle within the bedroom. Mr. Allen was arguably within feet of the actual act occurring. There were 2 children that were inside the house too. And investigators were concerned that, hey, how could you not hear what was going on?
Peter and his 2 children are brought to the police station for further questioning. Meanwhile, officers are dispatched to nearby parks and wooded areas to look for Manu's car, a white SUV.
In the morning, a neighboring county deputy, Wilk, from Archer County arrived, and he knows the Allens.
My oldest son, Wyatt, she was his teacher, and he thought the world of her. When I came through town on Main Street, I saw crime scene tape up around the Allens' house. And in Olney, you don't see crime scene tape up around houses that often.
As a typical law enforcement officer, he says, hey, what can I do to help?
I was asked to go out to Lake Cooper, look for a white SUV. I was given the license plate number, and when I pull into Lake Cooper and I go around to where the boat ramp is, I could see a white SUV on the other side of the lake where the dam is. So I got out, started looking at the vehicle, and activate my body-worn camera, take photos of the car, and I had noticed some brown smears on the car. And I thought, this looks like dried blood. So after I had photographed the car and the area around the car, I started looking around. So I took off walking towards the fence line. I looked to my left, and I could see a pile of clothes or blankets. And as I got closer, you could see the kind of the outline of the body wrapped up in these sheets and blankets. I felt the body. It was cold to the touch. Rigor had set in. I had my body camera going, and I think on my video camera you can hear me take a deep sigh because I know that the Allens are going to get notified that their mother has been killed.
We received a phone call from Mr. Wilk.
I got a dead body out here at Lake Cooper.
That he had located the vehicle and a body.
We have a whole crime scene back there at the house.
When we first arrived at the lake, you could see a outline of a white sheet over by the fence line.
Police confirm the deceased woman is Manu Allen.
Miss Allen had been stabbed multiple times, and a lot of stab wounds were to the head. I've seen quite a few homicides, and this one was very brutal due to the amount of violence that was involved and the care taken in the way that she was moved and placed at the lake. It felt very personal. That started leading us to believe that it was somebody that knew her.
Coming up, Suspicion falls close to home.
She had picked up the knife that was in the bedroom.
He said he heard something in the middle of the night,
causing rumors to swirl through a small town.
Everybody knows everybody. A lot of accusations started going around.
I said, I need you to look me in the face and tell me, did you have anything to do with this?
And investigators uncover new clues.
It was a communist block pistol, and it was semi-automatic.
Until a stunning admission leaves a family devastated.
It was just a shock that he confessed.
It was a nightmare.
The body of missing teacher and mother of four, Manu Allen, has just been located at Lake Cooper, a recreational area a few miles from her home in Olney, Texas.
I'd been to homicide scenes before, but when you find somebody that you knew and your kids knew, when I did go home and told my kids that, hey, I was your teacher that was killed, that was hard.
Olney, Texas is that small community where you don't expect this sort of violence at all. There had not been a murder there in the last 10 years.
As they continue their investigation, detectives examine several items of evidence, trying to piece together what happened.
The vehicle had turned down a little offshoot. It was approximately 20 feet from the road, and whoever was driving the vehicle had tried to turn the vehicle around and got high-centered.
Police believe that after the SUV got stuck, Manu's body was removed from the car.
The body was found within sight of the vehicle, and there had been yucca leaves placed around the facial area. If you have a body where the eyes or the face are covered, it typically means that the person who has been involved in the death somehow knew this individual.
When a killer does this type of behavior, it's because they're trying to show some sense of respect to the deceased.
Forensics process the body and collect fingerprint evidence from Manu's vehicle.
There were fingerprints that were located on the car that were in blood. When you find these, it's you can say the golden ticket for law enforcement because whoever was involved in this left their signature behind.
Another detail in the field grabs detectives' attention.
There was a bicycle track that was leaving from the area of the vehicle onto the main road.
Is it possible the killer had perhaps left on a bicycle?
It being a recreational area, there is the potential that it could have been just a person riding through the area, but you're going to collect as much information as you can.
Investigators catch a break when they find a witness who supports their discovery.
There was an oil field worker that worked on the road that comes right out from the lake heading into Olney, and he happened to see very early in the morning someone on a bicycle wearing dark clothes with a backpack heading towards Olney from the lake area.
While officers are dispatched to track down the cyclist, detectives inform Peter that his wife's body has been found and closely watch his response.
Mr. Allen, his emotional reaction was a little different than what you would expect.
Mr. Allen was extremely detached, emotionless. He said that, he wanted to get justice for Manuela and that he had multiple firearms and a lot of ammunition that he could bring to bear if he did figure out who had done this, and that he was going to do what the military had taught him to do. As a law enforcement officer, I get mixed messages from that. When you start saying that you're going to go after whoever did it, you have to wonder if he's trying to point the investigation in a different direction than on him.
Based on the crime scene, detectives believe that Manu was killed in her bedroom and removed from the home in the early morning hours. They want to know how this could have happened with Peter in the next room.
Mr. Allen said that he had been drinking vodka, and then typically if Mr. Allen had been drinking, he would not sleep in the same bed as Miss Allen.
Mr. Allen said that it was common for him to sleep on the couch because he snored a lot.
Peter claims the only time he woke up was around dawn when he thought he heard his wife's car starting.
He heard it and he didn't think anything of it. Mr. Allen indicated that it's not his job to check on where she's going.
And he apparently went back to sleep.
Police want to know how he heard a car start, but not his wife being attacked just feet away.
Obviously, there was a violent struggle within the bedroom, and Mr. Allen was within shouting distance, hearing distance of the struggle.
Mr. Allen had talked about how the incident may have occurred and that struggles can be silent, and that might be a reason why he didn't hear what had happened.
That's another cause for concern for law enforcement when you've got a suspect with a potential explanation for every possible fact.
Wondering how the killer escaped in Manu's car, investigators ask where she kept her car keys.
Mr. Allen, he indicated that those keys were not kept in the bedroom. They were kept in kind of a common area in the kitchen.
When asked why anyone would want to kill his wife, Peter has a theory.
During the interview with Mr. Allen, he had indicated that it was well known that he had a large gun collection, and he had spoken to a lot of people about it.
Mr. Allen was concerned that someone was breaking into the home to steal his gun collection.
Police are skeptical as they found no signs of forced entry and were not aware of any stolen items.
Well, as a law enforcement officer, I felt that Mr. Allen might be trying to steer the investigation. He had been drinking vodka that day. He was feet away from where the murder had occurred. He was very concerned about things that, in my mind, would not be of importance from somebody that had just lost their wife. So that made him rise to the top as a potential suspect.
Detectives believe that before Manu Allen's body was dumped at a nearby lake, she was stabbed to death in her bedroom while 3 family members were in the house. But her husband Peter insists he detected no sign of trouble.
Peter Allen, Manu's husband, said that he did not hear this vicious attack that was taking place within feet of where he was sleeping on the couch.
Skeptical of Peter's version of events, police want to speak with his children, Darian and Kiara, to see if they witnessed or heard anything. They start with his 15-year-old daughter, Kiara.
She said she was out with her boyfriend and that her father let her in the door around 11:30 that evening.
Her bedroom is where she went, which was right next door to her mother's room. She had put earbuds in her ears and had a phone call with a friend of hers and fell asleep with those in her ears.
Kira said that she never heard any screams or anything that alerted her that something bad was going on in the home.
Kira said she woke up that morning and she was trying to get to some clothing that she had washed, and the layout of the house would have required her to go through the master bedroom into the utility room, but the door was locked. And she said, Dad, the door's locked and I'm seeing blood over here. And that woke him up rather quickly. She said he asked her to go around to the other door in the garage and try to get in, but then when she did, she was met with just, the scene of the blood in the bedroom and everything else.
Kiara did walk through the bedroom and she did touch some items of evidence.
She had picked up the knife that was in the bedroom to examine it. She said that she did not see any blood or anything on it. Of course, picking up any kind of evidence is concerning. It leaves her information on the knife.
Investigators next interview Peter and Manu's 20-year-old son, Darian.
He said that he arrived back at the house at about 11:45 and then just went up to his bedroom. He said, I was playing a video game pretty much the whole night through. So I had my headphones on.
Darian said he had not heard anything other than he heard something in the middle of the night, but he just thought it was his father in the kitchen getting something.
According to Darian, he didn't find that unusual, so turned his attention back to his game.
There were 3 family members that were in the house. It was difficult for me personally to believe that they could not know that something serious is going on in a bedroom that's within, 20 feet from you. I can't explain that.
When you have all these people in the home when this occurred, you have to rule them out individually.
Fingerprints and footprints can either rule people out or you can rule somebody in. And unfortunately, it's not like watching a crime TV show where the case is figured out in 15 minutes. It might take months to get returns on some of these items.
Peter and Manu's other children, 21-year-old William and 18-year-old Melanie, arrive at the police station anxious for news about their mother.
They wouldn't let us see my dad. Probably after like 5 hours of waiting, they finally let my dad in, and then my dad told us that they found her body. It was a nightmare.
At the time of the murder, Melanie Allen, the older daughter, was actually at Six Flags that evening, and they never returned home that night. William Allen, the oldest son, was a student at Tarleton State University, and he was in Stephenville the whole time.
Both William and Melanie insist they have no idea who would want their mother dead.
I didn't think anyone would have a single thought about hurting my mom.
You have to talk to the children, naturally, to see if they can give you any idea of other red flags or things that might have been going on in the home.
Investigators were concerned about simmering, unresolved conflict that may have led to a murder. But when the children were interviewed, none of them ever described seeing Mr. and Ms. Allen having any kind of a noteworthy fight.
Police tell the Allen family that they're free to go, but they can't return home until forensics finish processing the house.
The next day, there was a lot of evidence that was collected. The investigators took fingerprints, footprints, in addition to the handprints that were on the wall leading back towards the bedroom.
Detectives zero in on an interesting detail.
It appeared that the perpetrator had left the bedroom and had gone into the kitchen to specifically retrieve something because there were not that many footprints in that kitchen. And the footprints went straight to where the keys to the vehicle were kept.
So whoever had done this knew where they kept the keys.
48 hours into the investigation, the autopsy report provides chilling new insights into Manu's last moments.
The autopsy revealed that Manu Allen had sustained roughly 47 stab wounds, the majority of which were to her head. She did have some defensive wounds on her hands.
However, it wasn't the stab wounds that proved fatal.
She also had suffered strangulation, and a great deal of force had been used, so much so that portions of the neck had been broken.
The autopsy report contains one final insight into the killer's brutality.
They did find a post-mortem gunshot wound in her facial area.
If you look at the totality of what happened with Miss Allen, the stabbings, the choking, and then finally the bullet, we knew we needed to get this suspect caught as soon as possible.
Two days after Manu Allen's murder, detectives have learned that in addition to being viciously stabbed and strangled, she was also shot once in the face.
There was a post-mortem gunshot fired at the lake after the body was moved to where her final resting spot was.
There was a bullet casing that was recovered from that particular area, and the actual bullet.
Police bring this new evidence to the crime lab, hoping to identify the gun used to shoot Manu. As people in the town of Olney await news of an arrest, rumors start to fly in the close-knit community.
There's a group on Facebook called Rants and Raves, and you will hear whatever is on somebody's mind about anything that's going on in town. And a lot of people were very hard on the Allen family.
It was really tough waiting for answers because other people in the town all wanted to point fingers at my dad. People looked at him differently. They would look at all of us differently.
Everybody knows everybody. A lot of accusations started going around. A lot of discussion about Mr. Allen's past, his prior military. A lot of people felt that Mr. Allen was potentially involved in the homicide of his wife.
His children stand by him, but some of Peter's friends doubt his innocence.
When I'd heard that Manu had been killed, I'm instantly thinking car wreck or something. So I called Peter's phone. And we hadn't spoken in quite a few years. Melanie answered. And I said, Melanie, what's going on over there? She said, well, Mom's been murdered. So I told her, I said, I'm on the way. I had some concerns about Peter and his military background. Peter, from time to time, drank hard liquor. I'd never seen him violent, but my thought was maybe something had snapped. Maybe there had been infidelity in the family or something. When I got there, I said, Peter, I need to know now. I need you to look me in the face and tell me, did you have anything to do with this? He looked me square in the face, nose to nose, and says, I had nothing to do with this, bro. You know I couldn't do it. And it led me to think, who could have done this? It was disturbing.
Detectives get a fresh lead when they receive new information on the cyclist seen leaving the area where Manu's body was dumped.
The day that the body was found, an oil field worker, around 6 o'clock in the morning, he saw a person headed from Lake Cooper riding back towards Alney on a bicycle. The local bank had security cameras on the outside of it, and a surveillance video showed somebody riding in town on a bicycle, dressed up in shorts with a backpack. The video footage that was received from the bank, it was from a distance, so you were not able to see a face for identification purposes. You could see it was a younger person. It was definitely the person that everybody was wanting to talk to, but we did not know who that person was.
The quest to identify the suspicious cyclist hits a dead end, and pressure continues to mount on the police.
The community's in a lot of pain. We were kind of in a situation where we can say, hey, we're investigating this, we have leads, we're working on them. Please be patient with us.
As police await analysis of the bullet and casing found at Lake Cooper, they call Peter back to the PD and ask him about his gun collection.
Peter Allen had told us that he had weapons and ammunition in the house and that they were stored in his bedroom in a closet.
Peter tells investigators not all of his guns are locked in the safe. He also keeps a loaded pistol in a dresser drawer.
It was a communist block pistol that would have been from like the Soviet Union, and it was semi-automatic.
Police never found this gun when they searched the house. Had the killer stolen it? Or had Peter staged it to look this way?
It felt as if Mr. Allen was trying to lead the investigation. But investigators are naturally going to start looking at other firearm thefts or burglary cases that have occurred in the area.
Investigators look into recent gun thefts around town.
Corey Taylor was a local kid there that had been in trouble, and it was learned that just before the murders had occurred, he had been involved in a burglary that involved firearm theft.
Had Corey entered the house to steal Peter's guns and killed Manu in the process?
Mr. Allen had maybe over 100 firearms in the house, so that became a potential motive for the killing.
So we go to Corey Taylor's house. When I got to his apartment, Corey came to the door and told him that I was there so that he could be interviewed about the murder of Miss Allen. Corey indicated that he did know Miss Allen from school.
Officers asked Corey for his whereabouts the night of the murder.
His alibi was totally void of having any contact with the Allen family residence whatsoever.
As Corey speaks, officers see something suspicious.
I noticed a bicycle, and the tire mark from the bicycle, it looked very, very similar to the tracks at the lake.
It had the exact tread that was seen out at the lake close to Manu's body and the vehicle.
So a red flag went up there.
Detectives working the homicide of Manu Allen have noticed a suspicious bike in the apartment of 17-year-old Corey Taylor. Could Corey be the cyclist from the surveillance video?
One of our investigators was able to see a bicycle, and he's actually able to take a photograph of the treads on it, and everybody was kind of like, oh, that's probably the bicycle we're looking for. Mr. Taylor denied that it was his, but he indicated that the bicycle was actually owned by a guy named Julius Mullins.
Corey Taylor said that his friend Julius Mullins had dated Manu's daughter, Melanie.
Detectives are curious if Corey is trying to deflect blame. They press Corey for more information about his friend, Julius Mullins.
Julius was a running back for the Alney football team, and so as far as the community, he was known.
Julius Mullins was well-liked by the other team members. He seemed to have some success on the field, but Julius Mullins did not always have the best home life.
Julius didn't have a stable home. I know his relationship with his parents were strained.
He had stayed with Corey Taylor some, as well as the high school gym, because the coaches had allowed him to stay there because he did not always have a place to stay.
Police learned that Julius knew Manu from school and had dated her daughter, Melanie, for a year.
He was a good person. My mom was extremely kind and accepting of Julius. She would help him with his homework. One time, he got kicked out of his house, and she let him even stay the night.
Despite Manu's love and support, Julius's behavior had changed in recent months.
Things just started going downhill. He just started doing worse and worse in school. He started getting in more fights with his parents. Him and I started getting in more fights. And I finally left him probably 6-7 months before what happened.
Police bring Julius in for an interview and notice some alarming details.
Julius Mullins, he had some cuts and scrapes on his arms and legs, which would be consistent with someone who had been out by Lake Cooper. There were a great deal of yucca and cactus plants, and you couldn't have gone through that field without getting scratched up by the shrubbery.
Mullins had indicated that the night of the murder that he had went to a party with several other people. After the party, he said he went to Corey's apartment and crashed for the evening, but he had not seen Corey that night. So the alibi was pretty weak.
Julius Mullins admitted that he owned the bike that was at Corey Taylor's home. The bike places Julius Mullins out at Lake Cooper where the body had been left because those tire tracks matched that bike perfectly.
So with any murder investigation, the interviewers in these cases are going to press pretty hard to get to the information.
Detectives asked Julius for more details about his alibi and the injuries on his arms and legs.
As they're finding inconsistencies in the stories, they're going to start breaking these stories down and get him to eventually just tell the truth. He was crying. He was emotional. And Mullins finally admitted that he had killed Miss Allen. At that point, Mullins started giving the information that was pertinent and matched what we had found at the scene.
Julius tells police he had gained entry to the Allen home through a faulty garage window.
Mullins accessed the garage and went into the bedroom of Miss Allen. I believe Miss Allen was surprised when Mullins started the assault. He continued to assault her, and she fought for her life. Mullins stabbed her multiple times and then eventually choked her to death. He then took the sheets off the bed, wrapped her up so that he could move her.
Police believe Julius then found Peter's Soviet-made pistol in the dresser drawer and headed to the kitchen to grab Manu's car keys.
He then drug her through the laundry room, through the garage, through the backyard, out to the alley, and loaded Miss Allen into the car. He loaded his bicycle into the car with him, and he drove her to the lake.
Julius planned to hide the body far from the road, but the vehicle got stuck on the rough terrain.
So he put together a hasty plan and pulled her out and drug her to a fence. He then took the gun and fired one shot, hitting her in the face to ensure that she was dead. And then he took his bike and he fled the scene. It was a sigh of relief in some respects that he confessed. Mullins did indicate that he was still in love with Melanie and was upset about that. We asked him why he would want to kill the woman he loves' mother. And Mullins said that he had a gun to his head. According to Mullins, on the evening before the murders had occurred, he said that he had gone to Allsup's and had run into Peter Allen in the store, and Peter had him come outside into Peter's car, and Peter had pulled a gun on him and pressed it to his chest and told him to kill Miss Allen, and that if he did not do it, that his whole family would be killed. He said that was the reason for committing the murder.
Julius Mullins has confessed to the murder of Manu Allen, but claims that he was forced into it by her husband, Peter.
Mr. Mullins gave very specific information about them meeting at an Allsup's convenience store, where Mullins said Mr. Allen pretty much just pulled him into his car and said, "Hey, you're going to do this. Otherwise, I'm going to go kill all your family."
When Mullins made these accusations toward Mr. Allen was still a person of interest.
Police try to verify the alleged meeting between Julius and Peter.
We were able to secure the phone records of Julius Mullins back to the day that Mr. Allen supposedly threatened Julius into murdering his wife, and were able to determine that Mr. Mullins' phone was nowhere near that Allsup's location at any time that day.
Police interviewed Julius again to clarify his allegations against Peter. He insists he's telling the truth and provides more shocking details about the murder.
He said that after Miss Allen was dead, that Peter assisted him in wrapping the body and pulling her out to the alleyway and then loaded her into the car.
Detectives receive forensic results and check if Julius's account matches the evidence.
There were some bloody handprints and some fingerprints, and they had footprints that they had sent to the crime lab, and they were eventually identified.
Forensic testing determined 2 people had left footprints in the kitchen. One set was left by Julius.
Julius had been in the home frequently when he was dating Melanie, and the footprints went straight to where the keys to the vehicle were kept in the kitchen, and Julius would know that.
Investigators wonder if the other prints belong to Peter, but the results show otherwise.
Kiara left footprints, but she said that she had stepped in the blood, so that lined up with what she had said had occurred.
The crime lab also determines fingerprints left in Manu's blood in the house and on her car belong to one person.
Sure enough, they belonged to Julius Mullins. We were able to rule Peter Allen out.
The things that Mullins attempted to implicate Peter in, the physical evidence did not support that. The cell phone data did not support that.
The results were confirmation that Mr. Allen had nothing to do with this.
AB Mark?
Manu was my life. She was my soulmate. And I don't think any human being alive could expect for the heart, the soul, the core of the family to be murdered without reason whatsoever. I knew they were going to look at me because I was the husband and I was in the house. When the police made the arrest, there was disbelief. I just didn't think he had it in him to do something like that.
On July 15th, 2019, 18-year-old Julius Mullins is charged with the murder of Manu Allen.
My daughter Melanie dated him, and Julius would come over. My wife was very kind to Julius. We were both nice to him. I was not worried about Julius at all while they were dating. He seemed more like a pleasant young man.
With Julius in custody, police find Peter's stolen pistol at the home of Corey Taylor.
They did investigate Corey Taylor, but he was ruled out. No fingerprints, no footprints, no DNA, nothing. The sole perpetrator of the crime was Julius Mullins.
Police believe the knife found at the scene may have been dropped by Julius, but forensic analysis found it was not used in the murder.
Staff at the school had found Mullins' backpack with a knife that was eventually determined to have been involved in the murder of Miss Allen.
Tragically, no one in the house heard Julius's vicious attack on Manu.
Kiara put earbuds in her ears and fell asleep with those in her ears. Darian was upstairs playing video games with a headset on, and then Mr. Allen had consumed alcohol, and that might have contributed to him sleeping heavier than normal.
Julius Mullins was charged ultimately and pled to murder in the first degree. And he also pled to the abuse of a corpse.
Julius receives a 55-year prison sentence.
I can't even fathom what goes through someone's mind when they do something like this, especially to someone who has been so kind to them.
I was totally shocked that it was a person that had been trusted in their home. It was a person that Manu had assisted with tutoring and personal family issues that were going on with him.
Was robbery the motive? Was revenge the motive? I don't think we'll ever know unless Mullins decides to tell us why he did what he did.
The only thing I can think of is he felt that if he killed Melanie's mother, that it would break her heart. A twisted revenge is the only thing I can think of.
It tore me apart, and my dad was, of course, completely torn apart. You know, they were supposed to spend the rest of their lives together.
I love to smile, I love to laugh, I love to make jokes, but I haven't laughed or smiled like I did with her since it happened. There are generally two types of love. The one type is where you've been with somebody for a very long time, so you got that deep love. And then you got the other kind of love, which is the infatuation type love. And I had both of those for my wife. There is no such thing as moving on from that. I'm making progress, and my kids are making progress. But I'll never move on. That day will be stuck in my head till the day I die.
I wanted to grow up to be just like my mom, because I saw that she was a strong, kind woman that helped everyone she could, and she was nice to everyone, no matter who they were. I miss how she was always pushing me to do my best. I really miss her support.
A devoted couple building the perfect family.
They were both very committed to adopting children that had a difficult past.
Everybody in the family loved her.
Murdered in a night of unspeakable horror.
She saw a man with what appeared to be an axe.
Her skull was split with a maul.
Who could have wanted Bob and Kay Swartz dead?
This person had threatened to kill them.
We couldn't rule out anyone. We just didn't know.
And what detectives uncovered has everyone blindsided.
I didn't have a single suspicion. I would have never thought.
The relatives were in disbelief.
The expected killer hadn't done it. The unexpected killer had done it.
Nobody in a million years would have expected them to commit one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Annapolis.
On a cold winter morning in 1984,
Arundel County Police.
Police in Cape St. Clair, Maryland, receive an eerie call.
Okay, what is the problem, sir?
My parents are dead.
You think your parents are dead?
Yeah.
First responders race to the scene and make a horrific discovery.
When I arrived, there were uniformed officers that were protecting the crime scene who told me we had a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old who just learned that their parents, Bob and Kay Schwartz, were killed.
The children are visibly shaken and in shock, but agree to answer a few questions.
My partner and I met with a young man by the name of Larry Schwartz and his sister Annie. Both of them were very calm. This young man, he said that he had gotten up that morning and that Annie, who was 9, told them that she didn't know where their parents were. He then looked out the dining room window and saw his mother's body in the backyard. He told me he immediately shielded Annie's eyes so Annie wouldn't see her body and then called the police.
Detective Barr leaves the kids in the care of the attending officers and moves to the backyard. It's his first grim look at the scene of the crime.
Kay Schwartz was found outside. She was a few feet from the sliding glass door in the snow. She only had one sock on her right foot. Her left foot was bare.
The blood in the snow was horrific. It was just horrific.
The blood had created a slush in the snow. Kay Schwartz had puncture wounds around her neck, and she had a massive wound to the top of her skull.
Detective Barr then heads inside.
I looked in the basement area, and I found a black vinyl chair that had pooled blood beside it. It appeared as though she had been attacked sitting in that chair, and she bled heavily onto the floor. And there was blood from that chair leading out back.
Just when it seems the crime scene can't get any more grisly, detectives discover another ravaged body.
We found a small office adjacent to the landing of the stairs. The door was closed. We opened the door, looked inside, and found Bob Schwartz's body. There was an inordinate number of stab wounds to Bob Schwartz. There were defensive wounds in the body. We theorized at that point it was very possible that Kay was attacked first, and then Bob heard the noise and started to come out of the room, giving Kay the opportunity to flee out the back door as the killer or killers went after Bob.
As detectives make their way through the rest of the house, they see no signs of forced entry. Did Bob and Kay know their attacker? Or did an intruder sneak in through an unlocked door?
As I viewed this crime scene, the enormity was off the chart. There was blood found everywhere. It was extraordinarily gruesome.
Investigators collect blood evidence, but there's no sign of a knife or any kind of murder weapon. Then, toward the back of the house, they spot a critical clue.
We found a bloody palm print on the sliding glass door near Kay's body. We wanted to figure out who it actually belonged to. Bob obviously never left the computer room. He died where he was attacked. And Kay's body was outside, and neither one of her hands had blood on the palms. That palm print probably belonged to the killer.
While concerned neighbors whisk Larry and Annie away, detectives get a chance to talk to some of Bob and Kay's grieving friends who have gathered at the house.
When I found out that Bob and Kay had been murdered, I said, "What? You're numb. You don't know what happened." And I just couldn't believe that Bob and Kay were gone.
Bob and Kay Schwartz met at the University of Maryland outside Washington, D.C. They were both getting their master's degree in education. They both wanted to be teachers. He was 35, she was 27. She fell in love with him, and maybe 18 months later, they married.
They were very involved in all kinds of church activities. Kay and Bob were intimately involved. Everybody seemed to know them. Everybody felt a connection with them.
Bob was an engineer of sorts, worked at NASA Goddard down in Greenbelt, Maryland, in the space program on some level.
Bob had to be a pretty clever man because he was involved in computers back in the dark ages, 1984.
He was always very positive. He was funny, quick sense of humor.
Kay was the fun-loving, carefree spirit, beloved by everyone who knew her. Always wanted to be a teacher, became a teacher. They wanted children, but Kay was unable to have children.
Far from breaking their spirit, Bob and Kay's disappointment only seemed to strengthen their bond and gave them a loving sense of purpose.
They decided they wanted to open their house and their hearts.
In 1973, Bob and Kay embarked on their dream.
That became part of their mission in life, in adopting children that had a difficult past, to provide some substance and some guidance.
Larry Swartz was 6 years old when the Swartzes adopted him. 6 years later, they adopted a 4-year-old girl, Anne.
Annie was born in Korea, did not speak much English when she first arrived. Annie and Larry were happy to be part of that family.
Kay and Bob wanted to be the best parents ever to those children.
Now, Larry and Annie were orphans again, and detectives need to find out who committed such a heinous crime and why. Police begin by talking to neighbors, hoping to find a witness who might lead them to the killer.
We were alerted by a person approximately a block away on a parallel street that he had found what appeared to be a blood trail leading into the woods at the end of that street. And as we followed that trail, we found what appeared to be a barefoot footprint and a socked footprint.
Were these Kay's footprints? If so, how did they end up in the woods when her body was found in the backyard?
We also found a pair of footprints made by shoes. Footprints suggesting a chase through the neighborhood.
The trail of footprints ran for quite a distance through the woods and the neighborhood.
The footprints seemed to suggest that after stabbing Bob to death, the murderer went after Kay one last time.
In my opinion, it appeared as though Kay Schwartz was fleeing from her killer, and at some point, a person caught up with her and then walked her to the back of the home where she was killed.
At the end of the trail, detectives make one more pivotal discovery.
Searching through the woods, my sergeant found what appeared to be a murder weapon. It was a wood-splitting maul. There appeared to be blood on the maul, along with hair. But the handle appeared to have been wiped clean. There wasn't any blood on the handle at all.
Detectives send the maul to the lab, but find no trace of a knife anywhere. It's a puzzling scene that offers them few clues.
It was a very difficult crime scene to try to put together in your mind what may have happened or how did this occur. At this point, we only had 2 children, Larry and Annie, who could provide any information.
When detectives circle back to them at the neighbor's house, they do their best to help.
Annie related to us that she had awakened in the middle of the night to her father's screams of "help me, help me." She continued to tell us that she went to investigate and she walked to the door that exited to the carport. At that point, she saw a man walking away with what appeared to be an axe over his shoulder. And she described the person as very tall, with curly hair, and I asked, was that person as tall as me? She said, no, he was taller.
Detectives speak to Larry next, but suddenly the 17-year-old seems nervous. Does he know something about the man Annie saw in the yard?
When we pressed Larry, he said that Michael was 6'4".
Detectives stop cold. Who is Michael?
And very quickly I established that Michael Schwartz was a brother of Larry.
As it turned out, Bob and Kay Swartz had adopted 3 children.
Michael, who was also 17, no longer lived with them, but it wasn't clear why. So at that point, we were very, very eager to talk to Michael.
Coming up, investigators uncover bad blood and dark secrets.
They send him to a state mental hospital.
Detectives uncover startling clues.
Nobody expected anything like this to happen.
It became almost unbelievable.
Was there more than one person with a score to settle?
This person said, I could stick a knife in his back.
We didn't know what we were dealing with.
When they appear to have no suspects in the homicides of Bob and Kay Swartz, police learn the couple's adopted children have an estranged brother.
Both Annie and Larry related to us that Michael no longer lived with them, but had been getting into a lot of trouble.
Detectives are anxious to know more. Could Michael have possibly wanted to harm Bob and Kay?
As we spoke to relatives during the investigation, Michael was quickly identified by them as someone we should look at very closely.
Michael had made threats internally in the house.
Detectives interview the Swartz's friends and family to get more insight into Michael's history. Larry was the Swartz's first adopted child. But long before Annie, Bob and Kay provided Larry with a brother.
Michael was 8 years old when the Swartzes adopted him. The boys were only 6 months apart in age.
The Swartz's second adopted child had arrived at their home, a troubled boy.
As they interviewed everybody, detectives found that Michael's mother abandoned him when he was an infant, and Michael was relinquished to the custody of the state and became a foster child. He went through a series of 6 foster homes before the Swartzes adopted him.
Bob and Kay were determined to turn Michael's life around, but the boy's difficult past wasn't easy to shake, and the problem started almost immediately.
Michael was so antisocial in his approach to life. Michael was having behavioral issues at home, not obeying his parents on a consistent basis, smarting back, profanity.
As the boys grew older, Michael continued to struggle. But that didn't stop Bob and Kay from having high hopes for both their children.
I think Bob and Kay expected Larry and Michael to apply themselves very diligently to their studies and to do well. I think that Larry had a desire to please people. He had kind of a soft-spoken shyness to him. He seemed to want to engage with people. But I think Michael was a challenge from the get-go. I think Michael, he had some deviancies that probably would have precluded anybody from having any type of relationship with him on any level.
2 years after Michael was adopted, Bob and Kay found a new ray of hope when they adopted Annie.
Annie was cute as a button when she arrived. Everybody loved her.
Bob adored Anne. Annie became the apple of her father's eye, and suddenly Annie, the baby, became the favorite child. Everybody in the family loved her.
The more attention Bob gave Annie, the harder he was on his 2 boys. Larry seemed to be able to turn the other cheek, but not Michael.
Michael had been getting into trouble more increasingly over the last year or so.
Michael began to have problems of a fairly serious nature. Tension between he and his father, tension between he and the other family members.
By 1980, Michael's rebellious nature pushed his parents to their breaking point.
One night, Michael asked to go out, and they said no. So he sneaked out. Went out with his buddies. When he came back home at about midnight, he pounds on the door. His mother comes to the door, looks at him and says, "No, we're not letting you in." He goes over to a neighbor's house, spends the night, goes to school the next day on his own. And while he's there, his parents had called. Social services said, we can't handle him anymore.
After 5 years of struggling with Michael, Bob and Kay were so concerned about his volatile behavior that they asked the state to place him with another family.
He never lived at home again.
It was just a very difficult situation. Bob and Kay loved him, but they felt there was nothing they could do for him.
While Bob and Kay tried to stay focused on Larry and Annie, Michael's state of mind seemed to deteriorate.
Michael had been in a reform school and he got in a fight and got in some trouble, so they sent him to a state mental hospital for evaluation. And that was just a few weeks before the murders. He was staying at this facility.
The Crownsville State Hospital Center was terrifying, faceless, institutional, decrepit buildings, straight out of a Stephen King nightmare.
Had Bob and Kay's rejection led Michael Swartz to commit a cold-blooded murder? Detective Barr and his partner decide to make the short drive to Crownsville and ask Michael for themselves.
He was interrogated by these talented homicide detectives. Michael's denying.
Michael's words say one thing, but to the detectives, his appearance tells a different story.
They did notice it. Michael had very noticeable marks on his long neck, and he clearly had an injury of some kind there. But he said they were hickeys.
Detectives keep pushing, but Michael is adamant that he was at the hospital on the night of the murders, and the hospital records back up his claims.
We learned from the staff that their logs indicated that Michael had been there all evening.
He has what appears to be an ironclad alibi. I mean, he is in a locked ward in a state mental hospital.
The police weren't so sure. A lot of people weren't so sure. It was very lax at this Crownsville State facility. It's not a prison. It's just a hospital.
Detectives aren't completely convinced of Michael's alibi, but they don't have enough to arrest him either. And soon after that interview, Michael Swartz lawyers up.
Of course, I finally got to him. I did what all defense lawyers do, which is to say, don't say a word to anybody about anything. He was never interrogated again.
Michael won't talk, and the lab has found no useful prints on the handle of the splitting maul. But detectives know one key piece of evidence from the crime scene that could tell them everything they need to know.
During the investigation, there was a bloody palm print recovered from the sliding glass door. We had examined both victims. Neither one had blood on the palms.
If detectives can prove Michael Swartz left that print, they'll have their murderer. But that's easier said than done.
This evidence was difficult to analyze. We were very limited in 1984 with what we could do. This would involve the evidence being sent to the FBI laboratory in Washington.
Detectives investigating the savage double murder of Bob and Kay Swartz are hoping one of their most promising pieces of evidence will help them catch the killer.
A bloody palm print was lifted and sent to the FBI laboratory for analysis. We knew that it would probably take a long time to get those results.
While the feds in Washington do their careful work, the shocking news of the murder spreads.
There was a tremendous uproar in the community about this murder. A couple were murdered in their own home. A crazed killer chasing a woman through the neighborhood. There was a lot of pressure to solve the case.
That pressure only mounts when detectives receive the coroner's report. It's a grim account of a seemingly psychotic attack.
The wounds to Mr. Swartz numbered 17 in total, and in fact were lethal. Both his right and left carotid were severed during the attack.
On Kay Swartz, the autopsy showed that she was stabbed 7 times around her neck area, but they were very light wounds, tentative. And then her skull was split, with a mall.
Detectives still haven't been able to locate the knife used in the attack, but the coroner's report does appear to confirm that they're on the right track.
According to the medical examiner, we had the right theory about how this may have occurred. Kay was stabbed in the basement, got up to flee. The killer would have chased Kay Schwartz as she ran from the neighborhood and into the woods, then back to the house where she was killed.
Is it possible Michael Schwartz eluded security at the Crownsville Mental Hospital and committed this crime? If so, detectives need to understand why.
I think it's fair to say there was tension in the house. Bob had a bit of a shorter fuse than Kay and had a little bit less willingness to be tolerant of some of the children's shortcomings.
Neighbors tell detectives a story they remember from a few years before, when Michael was still living with the Schwartzes.
Michael got in trouble for some sin, fighting on a school bus, something like that. And his father decided physical labor was what he needed. So he gave him this heavy wood splitting maul and said, take this stump out of the front yard, a dead tree stump. It was massive, a massive thing. There was no way Michael could get it. But he just swung it again and again and again.
Neighbors told us that Michael chopped at that tree every evening for up to 3 hours. And approaching a month later, the stump was still there. This boy had blisters on his hands.
Michael was seething and getting more and more angry. Everybody said Michael had threatened to kill his parents.
Could the maul that was used to teach Michael Schwartz a lesson have been the same one that ended Kay's life?
Michael told his mother, Kay, that I could walk up to Bob and stick a knife in his back, kill him, and no results would befall me because I'm a juvenile. The logical assumption on all of our parts was Michael had made good on his threat. He had said he would do it, and now he's done it.
"4 days after they were found brutally murdered, Bob and Kay are laid to rest.
The funeral, I had replays of having moments with them. I always admired them. Like, why would somebody kill them?
The couple's obedient children, Larry and Annie Schwartz, have been staying with friends of the family, while their brother still resides at Crownsville.
Michael Schwartz was allowed out of the hospital to come to the funeral, and at the cemetery, both boys stood over the grave and shook holy water, one into Kay's grave, the other into Bob's grave. Off to one side, the two detectives on the case stood in their suits with their sunglasses in the cemetery.
Everyone gathered around, gave them their support. But most people believed it was Michael who had done it.
Many note the suspicious red marks still visible on Michael's neck. Talk spreads through the community.
The newspapers were saying that Michael was a suspect. But even though he was in Crownsville at the time, there was some question about the accountability there, and maybe he could have gotten away and done it.
With lingering concerns over Michael's alibi and the security at Crownsville, detectives decide there's only one way to find the truth once and for all.
Wanting to make sure that we had crossed every T and dotted every I, my partner and I decided that we were going to follow up and visit that mental hospital again. We wanted to make sure that it was impossible that Michael would never have been able to leave undetected. So we asked the staff to lock us in the ward where Michael was committed. If Michael could have gotten out of that, there was a chance Michael had done it.
Detectives are about to put Michael Schwartz's alibi to the test. by locking themselves in the room where he stayed at the Crownsville Mental Hospital.
If he had killed his parents, Michael would have had to leave undetected, return, and get back in without someone discovering that. And we went through every door and every window, and there was no possible way we could have gotten out of that without help. So it was very convincing to us that Michael was not at the scene of the murder. Michael's been eliminated as a suspect.
It's good news for Michael, but a setback for detectives. The young man was their strongest lead. Undaunted, investigators reach out to the public, hoping to cast a much wider net.
As we conducted our investigation, we methodically went through a list of possible persons that may have intended harm to the Schwartzes. We started a hotline for people to call in tips, and we got phone calls from various neighbors and acquaintances.
One of the many calls that come in immediately piques the detectives' interest.
Persons we interviewed told us that Bob steadfastly picketed an abortion clinic in Annapolis for 4 years, never missed a Saturday. And he would approach women entering the abortion clinic and attempt to change their mind about what they were going to do.
He would intensely try to dissuade women from coming into the clinic. He would get up in their faces.
Detectives confirm that a few of those women filed police reports against Bob, so they begin interviewing every complainant and witness connected with those reports.
The police were called on several occasions by the clinic. Bob was never arrested, but he caused the abortion clinic a lot of grief.
Could the killer be someone Bob confronted, or someone with a grudge against Kay?
Kay was a school teacher at Broadneck High School.
In her classroom, she was known for laissez-faire, not a strict disciplinarian.
According to witnesses, Kay was well-liked in school. She was an easygoing teacher.
Detectives pursue every credible tip that comes in.
Our investigation revealed that there was no evidence that anyone would have a vendetta against her. In fact, there was no motive that we could establish where anyone would have been that angry or vengeful to want to kill either of them.
"8 days after the brutal double murder, investigators have hit a wall. With no fingerprints on the splitting mall and their single most promising piece of evidence still under analysis, detectives are all out of options. Undaunted, they decide to start fresh, poring over every piece of evidence they do have, starting at the very beginning.
Arundel County Police.
Police have something come to my house.
Okay, what is the problem, sir?
My parents are dead.
You think your parents are dead?
Yes.
This time, investigators hone in on something they didn't notice before.
When I listened to the 911 call, Larry Schwartz said, "My parents are dead."
My parents are dead.
However, he told the first police officer on the scene that he hadn't gone downstairs. His father was in the basement. At that point, he was only known that his mother was dead, not his father. So there's an inconsistency there. It didn't make sense.
The discovery leads Detective Barr to take a harder look at Larry's version of events, and he finds several contradictions.
For example, Larry telling us that he saw his mother's body from the window, yet I looked out the dining room window and couldn't see her body. I thought perhaps he was confused and meant to say the kitchen window, which turned out to be even worse. I climbed on the kitchen counter and looked out the window and still couldn't see her body.
Detective Barr had chalked it up to the extreme shock the boy had suffered that morning.
Larry's demeanor wasn't unusual at the time. Various people react differently under stress. He could have very well been in shock, repressing his feelings. I didn't know.
Barr wants to give Larry a chance to clear up his story. But that isn't going to happen.
Larry had gotten an attorney. The attorney had advised him not to talk to us.
At last, word comes in from the FBI. Test results on their key piece of evidence from the crime scene. The bloody palm print on the sliding glass door. The one detectives believed was made by the killer.
It came back. Finally, we could find out who it could possibly belong to, what we were dealing with.
Coming up, it's a twist that no one saw coming.
A chill just went up my spine. It just didn't seem right.
Detectives working to catch Bob and Kay Schwartz's killer finally had the results of their key piece of crime scene evidence from the FBI's forensic lab in Washington, D.C.
I was notified by the FBI laboratory that they had positively identified the bloody palm print recovered from the sliding glass door.
The results confirm what detectives believed months earlier. The palm print belongs to one of Bob and Kay's own children, but not the child they suspected.
It came back belonging to Larry Schwartz. At that point, the state's attorney for Anne Arundel County authorized an arrest warrant be obtained for Larry Schwartz.
Authorities charged young Schwartz as an adult with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
When the news gets out, it causes an uproar in Cape St. Clair. Michael Schwartz was known as the bad kid in the family, not handsome, likable Larry.
A chill just went up my spine. It just didn't seem right. I didn't have a single suspicion.
It was very difficult to accept that Larry had that type of violence within him.
Larry was seen as this model, mild-mannered son. Nobody in a million years would have expected him to commit one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Annapolis.
The community was in denial. The majority of them were convinced that Michael Schwartz had done this. There was certainly a lot of speculation about whether we had the right person or not.
It was very hard for people to believe that he could have done it. I think that they just felt there was more to this. There was more going on than any of us could understand.
Why would a docile youth, beloved by everybody, explode in a rage and stab both his parents? Why? Everybody wanted to know the answer.
Authorities want answers too. But Larry, at the direction of the defense team hired by concerned family friends, is not talking and has neither admitted nor denied guilt. So for the next 15 months, while Larry waits it out in jail, detectives spend every waking moment trying to build an airtight case.
We lacked a confession. The state's attorney for Anne Arundel County had me reassigned to his office to work exclusively on this case. We had to make sure that we had every piece of evidence we could get to close this case.
Without Larry's confession, detectives need to find out what led this soft-spoken boy to such violent extremes.
I continued to interview people, collect statements.
Investigators soon realized that Michael wasn't the only son who had a hard time at home.
I believe that Larry was under tremendous pressure. He was repeatedly chastised for the poor grades. He was restricted from leaving the yard.
I think it was more of a protection thing. You're trying to keep him away from the wrong crowd, and I think Larry could have been pulled in many ways. I think they were afraid of that.
I believe personally that he was angry. He was frustrated. It was cumulative, that he was holding rage inside him, and whatever may have happened that night set him off.
But some speculated that there was another reason why Larry turned on his parents.
Michael kept contact with Larry. He changed Larry's view of the family, and in a negative way. He was telling him that they just got rid of me, they want nothing to do with me, you know. Larry, he didn't want to be left like that. He didn't want to go into foster home again.
Larry was extremely worried that what happened to Michael would happen to him.
Then it changed where he was afraid he was going to be put out.
Despite what may have led to this violent act, 17-year-old Larry Swartz is about to be tried for first-degree murder.
15 months after the crimes, the prosecutor had witnesses ready to line up, psychiatric witnesses who said Larry was sane, and he knew what he was doing, and he actually planned it. And they had a case to present that showed premeditated, cold-blooded murder.
Larry Swartz looked unconcerned as he arrived this morning from the county jail where he had spent the last 15 months.
More than 60 witnesses have been subpoenaed to testify at Larry Swartz's trial, which is expected to last 2 weeks.
I was at the courthouse expecting a trial. There was no trial. Nobody expected anything like this to happen. It was shocking.
After detectives and prosecutors have labored more than a year preparing their case against Larry Swartz for the murder of his parents, a last-minute maneuver by Swartz's legal team has brought everything to an unexpected, screeching halt. The trial is called off.
Larry had confessed to his attorneys.
He broke down. He broke down sobbing and heaving, and he said he did it, he was guilty, and he just killed them.
Finally, authorities have their confession, leaving behind any doubt of Larry's guilt.
Ultimately, the expected killer hadn't done it. The unexpected killer had done it.
Now, the state's attorney's office has to decide what punishment could possibly fit this crime.
The state agreed to a plea of second-degree murder.
The prosecutor recommended a 20-year sentence with all but 12 suspended. The judge agreed to make it concurrent as opposed to consecutive. I've never seen a case that lenient.
The state's attorney wanted me to take Larry to the confinement facility. He knew that if I took Larry, there was a potential for Larry to tell me why he did this and how did it really occur. And I sat down with him and asked him to tell us, Larry, why did you do it? He didn't answer me. And I pressed him again, and he said, I just lost it. He said that he had come home from school that day, and later in the evening, his mother had asked him how he had done on his tests. And he knew that he had failed Spanish, and she had been writing him about not doing well in school. And she made a caustic remark about his grades, you probably failed them, meaning the tests. So he took a knife and he stabbed her repeatedly about the neck. And then Bob was alerted to the activity, the noise, and he attacked Bob. Larry never did explain or admit to chasing Kay through the neighborhood. I found out during the autopsy that she had been stabbed through her esophagus, so perhaps she couldn't scream. With sheer terror, running for her life, Larry did admit to putting the splitting maul into his mother's head.
After committing such a violent act, Larry knew there was only one way to cast off suspicion.
County Police.
We came to the realization that throughout the interview with Larry, he was trying to steer our investigation. He force-fed us information about Michael.
The whole time that his brother Michael was a suspect in the killings, Larry played the victim card.
When we were here for the funeral, Larry wanted to hang out with us, essentially, which we were perfectly prepared to do, not believing for a minute that he was involved. We viewed him as a victim, a kid who didn't have any parents at this point in time. It's, to this day, hard to fathom.
Though Larry's adoptive brother Michael had been exonerated, he nonetheless met with a tragic end.
When it turned out that he didn't commit the murders, he had nowhere to go. His parents are dead. His brother's in prison. His sister's been adopted by another family, and he has no one in the world. He starts doing drugs, and while he's taking drugs, he and his buddies go rob a man, and in the course of robbing the man, they stabbed him to death. Michael is sentenced to prison for life. None of the leniency his brother got. Life. He's now in his 50s, still in prison in the state of Maryland, 35 years later.
This just had to be one of the worst lose-lose destructive situations that society can see happen.
Looking back over this case, I have empathy for both Michael and Larry. I know that they struggled, yet the parents still tried to do the right thing.
Kay and Bob had adopted children who had been through a lot of bad times. And so I think they were trying to heal the wounds that they came to the family with.
For both Michael and Larry, I could understand the frustration, the anger, but I couldn't understand the murder. That's the part I didn't understand.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com. A vibrant, outgoing woman starting the next chapter in her life.
She's just retired, and she was very much focused on the future. Diane was a person that everyone should meet in life. Positive, happy.
But her life is cut short in a night of immeasurable horror.
There was blood splatter everywhere.
I never saw so much trauma to one person's body.
It chills me to the bone.
Police have a complex scene and a long list of suspects.
There was over 100 male contacts in Diane's phone.
There was always drama with boyfriends.
He refused to give DNA. There was something out there that he was hiding. Every direction we followed, we ended up running into dead ends.
Just when police think they might never catch the killer.
Who could it be? Why is this so complicated?
The case takes a mind-blowing turn.
And I was like, what? Oh my God.
No one expected this case to break on something like this.
Union Township, New Jersey. A bustling East Coast community with a small town feel.
Union Township's a mix of mostly suburban, but it's got its downtown area. It's peaceful, it's quaint, it's safe.
But all that changes on a cold November afternoon.
911, where is the emergency? I can't even think of the address right now. Okay, ma'am, listen to me. Take a deep breath. What's going on there? She's not answering. Can you tell me if she's breathing or not? No, she's not. Harry, please. Please, Harry.
After receiving a call from the victim's parents, the Union police responded immediately to the home. The father was across the street with the mom, and they were clearly in shock.
The couple tells police they found their daughter, Diane Zaleski, unresponsive inside.
When I got there, there was massive amounts of blood in the foyer. The walls were covered with blood spray. There was just blood everywhere.
We followed the blood trail into the basement and discovered the victim's body.
She had clearly been dragged to the basement.
You could see her at the bottom of the stairs. She was literally in a pool of blood. There were stab wounds all over her torso, her face, her neck.
There were defensive wounds on her arms and hands. We knew there was a struggle, no doubt. I never saw so much trauma to one person's body.
She was partially clothed. There was a pair of black underwear literally right next to her head.
Had the victim been sexually assaulted as well? Investigators find more disturbing clues.
There were 2 empty containers of solvent by the woman.
It appeared that the body had been cleaned.
So this was an effort to obscure evidence.
The killer also tried to erase their tracks throughout the house.
The kitchen sink was full of soapy water, and inside was the remote controls, some cleaning brushes, and lots of various items that it appeared the suspect had touched.
Also, the garbage can was gone, which led us to believe that the killer got rid of DNA or blood evidence or fingerprints. The entire bathroom area was soaking wet. The shower head was not in its cradle. We thought the killer took a shower, so we pulled the drain to check for DNA.
The crime scene was, how I would describe it, Herculean.
Detectives can't find a murder weapon, but forensics discover what could be a crucial piece of evidence the killer failed to clean up.
There was a droplet of blood on the floor.
It appeared to be foreign to us. It was cast off and inconsistent with the victim's blood.
He had cut himself somehow in the course of the struggle, whether it be from a knife, from punching her.
We knew that the guy was trying to cover himself, but it was minute, and they found it. They saw that blood.
We immediately swabbed that piece of evidence and transported it to our DNA lab.
Detectives get more information from Diane's parents.
They had gone to the house because she was supposed to take a sister-in-law to a doctor's appointment that morning, and nobody could get in touch with her.
They entered her home and they discovered Diane's body.
Her parents were really suffering.
Diane was a born and bred Jersey girl, gregarious and adored by her friends.
Diane, she brought joy to a lot of people's lives. Very positive, happy, laughing, and dancing. Even though she wasn't married and she didn't have children, she was very much focused on her family. Her parents were a little bit older, so she was kind of watching over them. And I knew her brother because he had lived with her for a while.
After 17 years of working as a legal secretary, Diane was now taking time for herself.
Here's this young single woman in her own house, and she's just retired. When she was offered a certain buyout package, there was no hesitation. She was ready. She had worked long and hard in her life. Diane was social. She had her friends from work, and often they'd go to happy hours. Then she had her dance friends. She would go on dates. She would just say, you know, Joanne, in the end, I'm just looking for a guy who can carry in my packages. She still had hope that she was going to meet somebody to spend life with.
As investigators finish processing the crime scene, a theory evolves.
There were no forced entry marks that we could find in the house. He took the time trying to obscure everything. He tried to clean her body. All this took time. In addition, there was a pot that appeared to have food in it.
In addition, there was a pot that appeared to have food in it. There was no hesitation. She was ready. She had worked long and hard in her life. Diane was social. She had her friends from work, and often they'd go to happy hours. Then she had her dance friends. She would just say, you know, Joanne, in the end, I'm just looking for a guy who can carry in my packages. She still had hope that she was going to meet somebody to spend life with. maybe Diane had been cooking or had been eating when her killer entered her home, and there was a fork from that pot that we found in the kitchen sink full of cleaning fluid, which led us to believe the suspect had also taken time to eat.
I was involved with at least 150 homicides. I never saw anyone hang out in a house after a murder. I just never heard of it.
We felt it was someone Diane knew.
The killer was very comfortable in this house after the death of the victim.
Which led us down the boyfriend road, or someone who was dating her road.
But what was the killer's motive?
For any human being to do this to another human being is, I don't even have a word for it.
Police rule out robbery since nothing appears to be stolen, including Diane's wallet. And when investigators look through it, they find a clue.
We found a business card.
It belongs to someone named Mark. Who is this man? And could he know anything about Diane's brutal murder?
We found out from her family that he lived in the general area, and it was a bar just up the street from where Diane lived. And we found out that they had been there. So we think that's where she actually got his business card. And because she was out there, she was dating, we wanted to speak to everybody. Maybe he had some information. He came in, and I showed him a picture of her, and he flat out refused to say that he even knew her. He said he had no idea why the card was in her wallet. And then he said, she's not the target I would usually go for. Target?
Coming up, old boyfriends with disturbing pasts.
There was a restraining order in effect.
Play cat and mouse with police.
That wasn't his real name. This guy was ducking us.
When an unexpected tip sparks a race to find the killer.
Oh, he was just a monster.
There was now an absolute manhunt.
Police investigating the gruesome murder of Diane Zaleski found a single business card in the victim's wallet. It belongs to a man named Mark. Investigators want to know if he and Diane recently met, and when detectives question him, they become suspicious.
The words that came out of his mouth about targets were very strange. His mannerisms and just the things he said, just, they were wrong. I don't call girls that I'm going to go out with targets. He had done something, maybe, to other women. He wouldn't tell us anything.
Detectives found a drop of blood at the crime scene that they believe belongs to Diane's killer. Could it be linked to Mark?
He refused to give DNA. Just out and out refused.
It was something that was concerning to us. Someone who's innocent usually is cooperative.
He had taken a bottle of water from us, and when he was finished, he wouldn't throw it out. He left. And he carried his bottle of water with him. So he obviously knew something about DNA. So I followed him. He walked about 2 blocks away from the building, and he threw it.
Detectives collect the bottle and send it in for testing. As news of the murder spreads.
I couldn't believe it. I just was like, oh my God. Oh my God. It was like a bad dream. I just couldn't believe that it was her. It was just so devastating.
Police fan across Diane's neighborhood, hoping someone saw something.
One older neighbor told us that earlier she had seen 2 children playing outside. And she knew one of the children lived in the neighborhood. She didn't know who the other child was. During the winter, she had seen him shoveling Diane's driveway.
Had the neighborhood kids witnessed anything out of the ordinary?
And so detectives wanted to identify those children. And when we spoke with the neighbor across the street from Diane, kind of diagonally, she said she had a daughter and a grandson. So those were the children identified as being outside.
All she could say is, I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. her 11-year-old grandson. Didn't indicate anything else, and boom, the door gets closed and we're done with our canvas there.
But detectives do get information that raises some troubling new questions.
The neighbors told us that her garbage can was outside in the street, which led us to believe that the killer got rid of the garbage. How would he know that if he put the garbage out, it would be gone in the morning?
And why was the killer so desperate to get rid of it?
Was there evidence or fingerprints? We didn't know.
We contacted the local garbage company, and we unfortunately discovered that it was already in the incinerator.
When detectives reviewed Diane's autopsy report, they learned she was killed sometime between 10 p.m. and 1 the next morning.
The medical examiner determined the cause and manner of death to be homicide and multiple blunt force injuries. The wounds were too numerous to count.
The person that had done this was obviously very violent. Some person who had snapped.
Because the body had been clean. The medical examiner could not determine if there was any signs of sexual assault.
What she had to live through, it's gruesome. It's frightening. I struggle with why. Why did that happen to her? I really don't understand that it was just a heinous crime.
A week after Diane's death, investigators get the results from the blood they suspect came from the killer at the scene.
We were able to obtain a DNA profile, and it was male.
We did enter the profile through a DNA data bank, and that came up negative.
So we knew we had the killer, we just didn't know who it was.
Will Mark be a match? Police have to wait another week to find out.
And he was negative.
Because DNA is the only piece of evidence police have to tie the killer to the scene, detectives need to find the match.
It was our goal to locate and interview every male individual that she was friends or romantically involved with and obtain a DNA sample. We discovered that there was over 100 male contacts in Diane's phone.
One of the first contacts detectives talked to is someone named Mike Prunell.
We showed him a picture of Diane. He was like, Mark denied ever knowing her. And okay, take people at their word.
Without anything linking Mike to Diane, detectives don't see any reason to question him further and let him go.
We are interviewing basically anybody and everybody, and we were coming up with nothing. We interviewed girlfriends just to get a feel of Diane, how she was, if she had mentioned guys she might have been dating.
And I met the prosecutor, and he wanted to know everything about Diane and what I knew about her. There was always drama with boyfriends. We thought for sure that it was one of those bad boyfriends.
A familiar name comes up, Mike Prunell. But he had told police he didn't know Diane, so detectives do more digging.
You know, checking driver's license histories and criminal histories, and you don't find Mike. We thought it was curious. We wanted to speak to him again, but he never returned a phone call. Every direction we followed, we ended up running into dead ends.
Why can't police find any records for Mike? And why did he lie about knowing Diane?
There was something out there that he was hiding.
When detectives ask Diane's brother Ron about Mike, what they hear completely surprises them.
Not only did he know her, but he asked Diane's father for her hand in marriage some 20 years prior. So he knew her real well. Another red flag.
Detectives investigating the murder of Diane Zaleski uncover shocking information about a prior person of interest. A man they interviewed, Mike Prunell, was adamant he didn't know the victim. But Diane's brother Ron tells police that's a lie.
We had found out Mike asked for her hand in marriage, he said Mike had an extensive history with her. He'd known her for at least 20 years. Prior to her move into the new house, she was renting an apartment from him for over a year. But he denied ever knowing her when I showed a picture of her to him.
Police discover more secrets and lies about Mike Prunell.
We found out that wasn't his real name. And when we did find out what it was, we ran his criminal history and we found out that he had domestic violence. And his wife at the time stated that he was beating her severely. He sat on her chest and was just pummeling her face to the point where her eye orbital was broken. So that sent flags off. We were totally convinced this was the guy, because he did beat his former wife. There was a restraining order in effect. And Diane was beaten so badly, this guy was pretty much ducking us. He wouldn't answer phone calls. It took us a little while to find him, but we did. Eventually got him in again a second time.
But again, Mike won't admit he knows Diane.
He was being less than truthful. It's like, okay, you deny knowing her, you asked her to marry you. It's very suspicious.
He was lying, obviously. We never discovered the reason for that.
Getting nowhere, police take another approach.
We asked where he was, the time of the murder, and he couldn't give us an alibi. We spoke to him in depth. He didn't give us any answers, nothing concrete.
Detectives can't hold him, but they don't want to let him go before getting one thing.
Eventually, he did consent to DNA. Our hopes are all raised.
We immediately transported it to our lab. We would get the result within 48 hours.
While they wait, Mike is released for the second time, and detectives work to place their suspect at the scene.
We found out that his brother ran a business close to Diane's house. Hopefully there was video evidence there for people that were coming and going. Somebody who worked there might have seen him. We interviewed everybody, but it didn't really drum up anything tangible. And there was absolutely no video surveillance at all. Nothing.
Detectives' next hope lies with the DNA results.
And it was negative. It wasn't a match.
We were feeling frustrated because we knew the killer was still out there. We had his profile. To say this wasn't a mountainous investigation is an understatement. We had to track down and obtain biological samples from close to 100 individuals.
We took swabs from her family members so that we could exclude them, but some point as being the source of the DNA.
While searching through Diane's computer, forensic analysts discover new information.
We took her computer. There were several different things that we found.
Everything is time-stamped. Hours after Diane's death, there was activity on the PC.
Numerous items, technology items, were attempted to be purchased using Diane's credit card. It was someone that was comfortable having things delivered to Diane's house and it not being out of the ordinary if they were the ones collecting them.
We knew he tried to purchase an Apple computer, an iPhone, and it didn't go through. We had no idea why the purchase itself didn't go through.
We also found that the killer, while in the home, was also searching pornographic websites.
I mean, to go on pornographic websites after you just brutally killed a woman.
Waiting for justice takes a toll on Diane's friends.
Who could it be? Why is this so complicated? We watch the news all the time and we see these things, we see murders, but when it happens to somebody you know, it's devastating. It's sad. It made me very sad about humanity. that someone is so capable of doing something so brutal to someone that is so beautiful. Everyone that loved her wanted closure on this.
3 weeks after Diane's murder, detectives get results back from the crime lab that send the investigation in an unexpected direction.
We tested the black underwear found next to the decedent's head. DNA profile was collected. That DNA came back to her brother.
After 54-year-old Diane Zaleski is savagely murdered, detectives discovered DNA from the crime scene belongs to someone close to home.
The DNA that was in the pair of underwear lying next to Diane came back to Ron, her brother. A lot of things ran through all of our minds.
We just couldn't believe it.
We thought that there might have been something sexual with her brother, and she had enough. And he had killed her, brutally killed his sister. Diane's brother worked for the Department of Public Works, so he would know when garbage was collected on her street.
The killer knew I can stay until the garbage is removed and then I'm safe to leave.
So there's a possibility that Diane's brother could have done it, collected all the evidence, and taken out the garbage. The killer was there for a long time. Diane's brother, he knew her pattern, her daily pattern. He would be comfortable staying on the scene, making themselves something to eat. I called him up that night and said, "Hey, do you got 10 minutes to come down and talk to me?"
Ron agrees to come in the next day.
How do you say this without accusing the brother of basically having sex with his sister? Because that's what it leads you to believe. I have this report saying that Ron's semen was found in the underwear, so I just put the report on the desk and I slid it over to him and I said, "What do you think?" It's like he was hit by a freight train. The jaw drops. He said, I can't explain it. It can't be true. He went on about the wash and the laundry, that up until just prior to her death, she was doing laundry at her brother's house. I sort of left it at that. I said, we can keep this between us for now. I'll talk to you again in a couple days.
In the interim, detectives send Ron's DNA to compare with the blood spot found at the scene. They also get some crucial details from Ron's wife.
The wife said he was home with me, he couldn't have done this, he didn't do this. We asked specific pointed questions. She told us they weren't Diane's underwear, they were Ron's wife's underwear. They had the same size and brand of underwear. She did tell us that Diane had been doing laundry in their house. We also found out sperm can be resilient into the wash. So the sperm that was in the underwear could actually be from Diane's brother, and her sister-in-law and her underwear got mixed up. The whole family got by his side. After conducting all the interviews, we all came to the conclusion that he didn't do a thing.
There's hard proof of Ron's innocence when investigators find out his DNA isn't a match for the blood found at the scene.
The case took lots of twists and turns, and there were parts that were shocking to us where we had to kind of sit down and regroup. Diane was also on some dating websites, so we also had to attack that aspect of the case.
Could she have met someone sinister over the internet?
Online dating can be frightening. There are people who are really troubled, and if they come across your path, you are the victim.
Detectives focus on someone who called and texted Diane a lot.
Kyle came to our attention because he was in her phone. And Kyle was very evasive. Didn't want to come in for an interview. He was just a friend. He wasn't romantic with her at all. At least that's what he said.
But was that true? Or did Kyle want more than Diane's friendship?
her circle of friends, said he was a possible person of interest. And we acted on it. We followed up on it. He was not cooperative. We obtained subpoenas to go find him and bring him in for statements.
When he finally did come in for an interview and refused to give a DNA sample, it was too intrusive to him. And he asked a lot of questions. Normally, I'm the guy asking all the questions. So it gets your radar up a little bit that something's not exactly right with this guy. He actually said that he was at the house the week prior to her death, so he was familiar with the house, wanted a relationship with the victim. He denied that. We didn't believe that was true at all. People that I'd spoken to didn't think that he was her type. Maybe she laughed at him and told him to get out. Why else would he be evasive if he wasn't hiding something?
There were no signs of forced entry at all to the home. So Diane must have let this person into her home.
Was that person Kyle?
Maybe he didn't go there with the intent to kill, but maybe something flipped the switch.
Detectives want to know where Kyle was the night of the murder.
He said he works nights, and all the access in the building was key card controlled.
Detectives check logs. There is a record of Kyle swiping in.
But who's to say that somebody else wasn't using his key card? Until we got DNA, we'll just never know.
Investigators tell Kyle if he wants to be ruled out, he needs to cooperate.
We did eventually collect his DNA. He was negative. DNA set him free.
As weeks turn into months, investigators are far from uncovering the identity of Diane's killer.
We're hitting the year anniversary of Diane's death. It was very hard to explain to the family that we were no closer. You saw a family not being able to fully grieve because they didn't know who did this.
It was like a bad dream. I was worried. I said that they should have found someone by this time.
We knew the killer was out there. We were feeling frustrated. He would never be identified. That was our worst fear.
It's been a year since Diane Zaleski was found stabbed to death in her home, and police are no closer to solving her murder. To find her killer, detectives come up with a new strategy.
You usually try to piece together the victim's life, but we felt we needed to come at this from another angle and try to figure out who our suspect was.
Detective Henderson met with the FBI profile unit to identify what type of behavior a person may have done this to Diane.
We talked to psychologists, psychiatrists, and we hashed everything out. Where we went, why we went there, what did this lead, is there anything still open? We went through all the DNA, we went through all the interviews, we went through the whole case. You know, the person trying to buy stuff online, the pornography that was visited, everything. We laid out the whole case.
The profile came back to a loner, a petty thief, possibly, someone with psychological issues. Someone that was in her life, but not for a long time.
Age would have been younger. It would have been somebody that was into technology.
We realized that the individuals that we were speaking to did not fit that profile.
To catch the killer, investigators generate new leads.
One of the things was, on the year anniversary, do a media blitz. Local TV, local newspapers.
We just wanted to see whether or not it might stir the pot.
detectives decide to release new information to the public.
So the things that we included in the press release, whoever killed Diane cleaned up after himself. We also said that we now have the killer's DNA on file. And then we recanvassed everywhere.
After a month, detectives have received a flurry of new tips. And one really grabs their attention.
Detective Rob Henderson received a phone call from an individual out of state indicating that she was on social media with an individual who was concerned about his well-being and his safety because he thought he was being investigated by police because of a serious crime he committed in New Jersey.
She tells me, I'm a stay-at-home mom. You may think I'm a little crazy, but I'm Facebook friends with this guy.
This woman was on Facebook and had met a person years earlier in a Facebook chat room and then eventually formed a friendship with this person. She explained to us that she had had conversations with him that were troubling to her.
She had said that he had told her that he had committed a murder.
This witness was very concerned for her family, but she said, if he had anything to do with this, I need to speak the truth.
We had been friends for about 3 or 4 years at that time. We used to chat through Instant Messenger all the time. He had a lot of different screen names. He called me his big little sister. He was 9 years younger than me. He told me he lived in New Jersey. He was fluctuating in and out of homelessness. He told me that he sold drugs and things like that, but I didn't feel like that was who he was. I think he was just doing it because he felt like he had to. Out of the blue, he's like, I did the worst thing you can think of. And I'm kind of sitting there thinking, like, what is he talking about? I don't know, a drug dealer getting killed. And I was like, what did you do? He said, they found DNA. And so I'm like, what do you mean they found DNA? While I was talking to him, I Googled some articles just to see if anything matched up with the story that he told me. And so I went online and I looked up murder, New Jersey DNA. And instantly an article came up.
She searched and she found the 1-year anniversary article. We put together to try to rekindle some interest in Diane's story.
I was shocked of what I did find. The article says that he tried to purchase an iPad with using her credit cards. The information that they put in the article matched what I knew about my friend. And a light bulb just went off in my head. I know that's him. It had to have been him.
She told us that he had been washing clothing at the home and at how he had literally been in his boxers cleaning.
She told me that he told her that he made himself dinner. Now, we did release certain things in the article about there was some food, but we didn't say he made himself a meal. We didn't provide that information, but he did.
We ended that phone call, and then within a matter of hours, we're booking a flight to visit her and to take some evidence from her. Upon meeting with her and looking at her computer and doing a forensic examination, we knew we had the right guy.
Detectives ask the woman for his name.
Nashon. That's what he called himself, because he didn't like his first name, Darnell.
She was a little nervous and a little hesitant, but eventually she gave us his full name.
Arnell Yearwood.
The last name gets detectives' attention.
We knew from our canvas that individuals with that same last name lived diagonally across the street from Diane.
When we look back at all the documented reports, it was determined that we had spoke to the killer's mother.
After over a year and a half investigating the grisly murder of Diane Zaleski, police finally get the break they need. They have the name of the suspected killer, Arnell Yearwood. And in a shocking twist, detectives discover his family actually lives on Diane's street, and they've been to the house.
We were there last year after one older neighbor told us that she had seen two kids playing outside. And she knew one of the children lived in the neighborhood. She didn't know who the other child was.
We did some more digging and some more investigation on Yearwood. Arnell Yearwood, although he was in his 20s, he was very small in stature. So he could be mistaken in a puffy jacket for a kid. We knew that Diane had some kids on the block helping shovel snow or do some yard work. It really led us to believe who was described as this kid was the killer. We went back across the street, made it look like we were canvassing other homes, but really we only had one home that we wanted information from, and that was his mother, Mrs. Yearwood. So we went to her home, said, "We know you have a son," and asked specific information about that son. And her daughter, who lived in the home, the mother of that child that was seen on the block, expressed to us that her brother, Arnell, had been at times living in the basement. And it would have been during the time frame of Diane's murder. That her brother sometimes would be outside with her own son.
Arnell's mother insists she has no idea where her 26-year-old son is.
We have to find this guy because we have to do a DNA match.
There was now an absolute manhunt.
A track and trace on Arnell's phone narrows down his position.
Somebody's got eyeballs on the house, and next thing you know, a kid starts walking down the street. And sure enough, it was Arnell Yearwood. And he was 5'1", 120 pounds, soaking wet, wearing winter clothes. Looked like a kid.
No one expected this.
We scooped him up and we took him back to the office. He was nonchalant. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think I was there then.
Detectives push harder, knowing they need to get a DNA sample from Arnell to compare to the crime scene.
He did consent, but after we took his DNA, he stopped talking. My boss called me at 7 o'clock that night and said, "It's him."
On April 7th, 2012, police arrest Arnell Yearwood for the murder of Diane Zaleski.
He was charged and brought back to the homicide task force and questioned again.
This time, Arnell starts talking, and investigators can now piece together what happened the night of Diane's murder.
She let him in based on the fact that he was a neighbor.
He did small chores for Diane. The garbage, minor painting, cleaning around the house. He entered the house to collect money.
Diane looked at him as the nice neighbor kid that she was trying to help. He knocked on her door that night and she let him in because she thought he was harmless. He wanted a romantic relationship and things went bad, and he did not take kindly to being rejected.
She told him to get out, and that's when he said he took a pair of scissors and he started stabbing her. In the entrance right at the front door, that's where the first attack occurred. After he had her down on the ground, he was strangling her. He dragged her down the stairs and left her body dead at the bottom of the stairs. And then he went about his cleanup, and cleanup of him, cleanup of her, and his pornography watching. And at some point he made himself something to eat.
But why would this kid brutally murder this vivacious woman?
The killer never talked about a motive, ever. And to prove a murder, you don't have to prove motive. We never identified what a motive was.
Whatever it was that caused him to act the way he did, so viciously, it will never be explained.
In court, Arnell Yearwood pleads guilty to the murder of Diane Zaleski. He is sentenced to 30 years in prison.
Oh, he was just a monster. I was disappointed, but I guess that's the maximum you can get. At least there was some accountability, because she deserved that. Her family deserved that.
The family made up black bracelets with white lettering that said "Justice for Diane, November 18th, 2010, which was the date she was murdered. And I wore that bracelet up until the day he pled guilty in court and went to jail. 2.5 years I wore that, and I didn't take it off.
Losing Diane is like a moment in life, like before Diane and after Diane. It's been quite a few years since she's gone, but I do still miss her. Her heart is still with me. She was so real and very kind, and she was funny. And every once in a while, I could feel her. I could feel her presence. And I think I look forward to seeing her someday again.
Yeah.